So good morning and a very warm welcome to all the panelists from top left, going in clockwise direction as I see it on my screen. People joining from near and far. Hilary, very warm welcome and a very early good morning to you joining from Europe. Randeep, Jagbir, Sandeep, Shyam, a very warm welcome to you. Different people joining from different cities. So just as a context and to set an introduction to the panel, we are, of course, here today to discuss how we make 5G relevant for tomorrow, both in an Indian context as well as by getting in global best practices into the Indian context. Of course, I've had the pleasure of working closely with most of you, but just by means of a quick introduction. My name is Rohan Dhamija and I'm a managing partner at Analysys Mason. Just to kick things off, if I could request each of you to please introduce yourselves for the audience that get to view this panel. Hilary, if you could start with you, please.
Sure. So first of all, thank you, Rohan, and the team for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. It's Hilary Mine. I run strategy and technology for Nokia's customer experience organization, which is our worldwide sales and marketing organization. I've been with Nokia for close to 20 years, worked in Asia, worked in Americas, and worked in Europe, and I'm based in Europe now. I'm very excited about all the things that are starting to really be possible with 5G.
Fantastic. Very warm welcome, Hilary. Randeep, if I could request you to introduce yourself, please.
Good morning to all. My name is Randeep Sekhon. I'm the CTO for Bharti for India, South Asia, based out of Gurgaon.
Fantastic. Jagbir, if he could request you to do the same.
Hi, good morning to everyone. I'm Jagbir Singh. I'm CTO for Vodafone Idea in India.
Sandeep.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Sandeep. I'm currently the global head of sales for STL, Sterlite Technologies. We are working to bring in fiber optic connectivity and also now playing a big role in the Open RAN ecosystem. Been a part of Nokia for 25 years, and it's great to be on this panel. Everyone here who I know extremely well. Hi, everyone.
Fantastic. Shyam.
Hi, my name is Shyam Mardikar. I look after mobile network for Reliance Jio. Excited to be on this panel.
Fantastic. Very warm welcome, Shyam. And Sanjay, to wrap the panel up, very warm welcome to you. If we could have you introduce yourself, please.
Hey, hi, everyone. I'm Sanjay Raina, part of the Mavenir team in India and head India and Southeast Asia. I have been in the telecom industry for the last 25 years. And I'm pretty much excited to be part of this team panel. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all. So very quickly, diving right in, ladies and gents, there are a couple of forces at play whenever we talk about 5G and whenever we think through 5G with the operators as well as with the vendor. Yeah. So on the one side, there is, of course, this huge potential in terms of new use cases with lower latency, with all kinds of other use cases that come to the fore, especially the enterprise use cases that come to the fore with and once SA standalone 5G comes into being. But on the other hand, we've heard operators rightly bring up the fact that the investments in 5G are significant. And whether it justifies a full business case for 5G, or whether we need to bring in some out-of-the-box innovative thinking, such as active sharing, such as Open RAN, so on and so forth, to help make the business case for 5G more viable. Yeah. So I'll start with the first post that we laid out, and if I may start with all of our operator friends on this panel. Shyam, if I could start with you. Just getting into and then wanting to get your thoughts on the use cases for 5G. So very broadly, if I may lay out the question, do you think 5G is going to be selling more of the same? So basically larger data bundles on the mobile broadband side, potentially some FWA. Or do you think 5G will truly revolutionize the use cases that are monetized, sold and monetized from an operator's standpoint. So if you could kick things off with you, Shyam. Thank you.
Thanks, Rohan. And I'll start with a slightly more ambiguous answer of yes and no, because the starting point of 5G logically is going to be more of the same, specifically in a country like India, where the 4G penetration has now kind of hit the ceiling. And with whatever limited spectrums we as operators have it marked to the world outside, we are almost 1/3 or 1/4 of the spectrum which we hold if we compare it with what the other folks out there have. If this gets added to the number of customers or the footfall or the density per square meter or per tower happening, we are again on the higher side, which means that we would definitely need much more spectrum to go ahead and deploy real customer-centric mobile broadband use cases. So EMBB for sure would be the biggest starter for the technology. The other thing, again, logically, because of the lack of broadbanded homes in the country historically, I think now it is going and getting better, but we still have a lot more homes to catch. I think that would be the second bigger use case would come over. But having said that, one of the things I keep on saying from 5G being different from 4G is about its ability to concatenate the holy trinity. The connectivity part will get added with compute as well as storage. And when you add these three together, it actually unleashes a totally different set of possible use cases, which kind of gets synced up with what industry needs right now. Pandemic has shown us the hard way, and I think that will become the way of living going forward in the coming decade, where we will talk about connected homes, connected offices, connected schools, things like health and education, things like agriculture and manufacturing. Now, all of them now need a step-up capability than the connectivity itself. Connectivity was given by 4G, but when you go beyond connectivity and you talk about embedded applications, real-time analytics, edge data computing, I think all of them will get unleashed by this power of 5G, not only from a technology perspective, but obviously, of course, and I am repeating it, but importantly, because of the amount of spectrum which gets unleashed in the whole wireless scenario. Like we said, I think it's a new world. The virtuality is going to hit in more than ever now going forward. So most of the new age use cases will evolve as the technology sets in, as the coverage stabilizes, as the technology stabilizes. But it will start with broadband and FWA and then seep its way right up to the last people, maybe people, machines, and enterprises all together.
Fantastic. No, absolutely, Shyam. Quite serendipitous that you talk about the virtuality that will come at play and that will really come into its own with 5G, especially with the pandemic, how each of us are living in a virtual world. So quite relevant there. Jagbir and Randeep, if I may move on to you and get your views and quickly pull you in on the discussion. So Shyam, of course, I think laid it out very well, where we start with more of the same, but then as 5G evolves, as the standards evolve, as there is more mass to the mass market in 5G, there are all kinds of really innovative and new use cases that will come to the fore. Now, Shyam, you touched upon a couple of and a whole bunch of consumer and enterprise use cases. But you spoke about virtuality, AR, VR, I assume you spoke about connected homes, so on and so forth. Randeep, if I could pull you in and have you speak a little about the enterprise and B2B use cases that 5G will really fire up and bring to the fore. So we've heard about 5G potentially being a driver for industries such as autonomous cars and autonomous driving, 5G being a driver for the security industry in terms of drone coverage and the like. So if we could just bring you in and have you talk a little about the enterprise-focused 5G use cases, please.
Yeah, so basically, Rohan, I feel that the capability we talked about of 5G, along with the compute and storage, along with connectivity, I think it also comes with a cloud native part of building the network. Hence, you can slice and create a private kind of a network for enterprise. That throws in extra amount of capability. In my view of adding to what Shyam said, 5G will enable a wireless connected world. Today also we have connected world, but there are limitations. Once you talk about wireless connected world in any parlance, if you talk about in any industry parlance, let's take a port. The port could have all all the machines using to offload or load a ship, or the small trucks which are used to bring the containers closer to the shop. Everything can be automated, and you can really monitor. So industrial use cases are kind of stacked on either it is safety, either it is driving safety, or it is driving productivity, or it is driving a new use case. So I would say safety and productivity will be more important, because you can, even if you use a drone use case, I mean, imagine on a large mine or a large port, you can use a drone to fly remote, create pictures, auto process the pictures at the edge, and then using an image recognition, you can see if there is something to be reported on security, rather than leaving it for the human eye to see that camera and report something. I think this possibility will start coming in when you bring on 5G, in my view, is a thought enabler and is in some way a functionality available. There have been enablers which are existing today also, but it is kind of provoking the industries to try out use cases around safety, productivity, and new innovation. I think productivity is more important in current case, especially India case, because if Indian industry becomes efficient, and then the Atmanirbhar India and India becoming a hub of maybe in a manufacturing industry, manufacturing in India and delivering it to the, let's say, rest of the world will become more important. And certain use cases which were dependent on physical, and that can move into a remote way of working, whether it is offices, factories, ports, airports, logistics industries, medical industries, education industries. I think it has a spin on everything, but it will still stick with these trica of a lot of connected devices using a cloud technology, so that you can actually bring applications to the edge. And then 5G is the access technology, and then you are processing using machine learning on an AI kind of algorithms, this data which you are getting through this connected world, to create use cases around safety, I would say productivity and innovation. So I see a big potential, but unlike the common thought that it will be like an off-shelf, it will not be off-shelf. All the use cases will be bespoke, which means industry and telecom industry ecosystem, which is the suppliers and this thing, and operators, mobile operators, and industry itself will have to come back and create that. How can we solve problem with these new, you can say, technology enablers which we have? It will take a time. I would say early movers in this journey of industry will really break through and probably gain market shares in competition. So it's
very interesting, and then fully aligned, Randeep. So just tying in and just bringing in some anecdotal evidence to what Shyam started off by saying, and then you jumped in on Randeep. So Shyam, you mentioned how at least for the first couple of years, the use cases will be about more of the same, selling larger data bundles, right? Especially in India. Interestingly enough, in the business cases that we built for operators in Western Europe and slightly more developed markets in the Middle East, even about 5 to 6 years out, even in more developed countries, operators agree that for the next 5 to 6 years, it'll be about selling more of the same. So almost about 2/3 of operator revenues from 5G up till 5 years post-launch are related to mobile broadband provisioning. So connectivity revenues in the classic sense, basically. So fully aligned there, not only in India, but also probably in slightly more developed countries. Then Randeep, the point that you said, the way you laid it out with safety, productivity, and new use cases, quite interesting there. And I want to get Jagbir and potentially Hilary in there. So we did surveys with operators that we were working in Western Europe. Interestingly enough, in Western Europe, the new use cases seem to be what's most interesting and what's most spoken about in an essay world, especially 5 years out. So we asked them what's most relevant 5 years till for the first 5 years of 5G launch, and then post 5 years of launch. Western Europe seemed to think that new use cases such as autonomous cars is what is going to be probably most interesting. A Middle Eastern country, Saudi Arabia more specifically, thought safety use cases will be probably most relevant, probably with all of the oil fields that they have and all of the safety issues they've had in their oil fields, so on and so forth. A lot of the respondents surveyed in China said productivity will probably be one of the biggest set of use cases that will benefit from 5G. So Jagbir, let me pull you in here. different regional operators giving different answers. Out of safety, productivity, and new use cases, especially 5 years out, what do you think would be the category that becomes most relevant in India?
Okay, Rohan. So I think most popular one which are being talked about, we have already, like Shyam and Randeep, they have talked. Coming back to your question, first thing, let's see, like, I don't know the answer first. Let me tell you that everybody's guessing right now.
Of course.
So the guesstimate could be like for productivity for sure, but I think safety security is also important, especially for India. We have to see the 5G, like from the operator point of view. Let's assume that 5G is giving the platform and giving the framework where actually you can develop the use case which are most relevant for us, India as a country. We don't know the answer other than the saying the high-speed mobile broadband. Other than that, everything AR, VR, gaming, whatever we say, actually we need to ensure this platform is so like, open and having the plug and play capability that I can plug any use case anytime. So we need to ensure from the implementation point of view that this is a platform. Let's assume that. I don't know the answer of the use cases. I know only the probable answers and bring them. So maybe the safety, security, and productivity, autonomous car and all, I don't think for India is like going to be so easy. And I also feel, I think going forward, the automation, even for the enterprise customer, you were asking to Randeep, I think the automation, digitization for the enterprise is very important. Even for our factories and, like automobile, etc. I think 5G will give that opportunity to do the automation. I also want to actually, from the operator point of view, one point which, like everybody finally will come to the bottom line is business case. So in this case, I think my view is that every time we as a telcos are being used as a dumb pipe provider. So whether it was 2G, 3G, 4G, and especially 3G and 4G, everybody's actually used us to provide. So all OTT enjoy actually having this broadband pipe. And I'm sure the 5G also everybody's trying to do that. I hope, I wish that all these use cases, whatever they come, at least some use cases are so tightly integrated with the 5G as a platform that we as telco also start making money. Not that somebody bring their apps, somebody bring their services, and they actually again use us like a dumb pipe provider. So I think whether it's going to be safety, security, going to be productivity, in this case, I think the operator's contribution towards creating the use case is going to be very big one to ensure that we are able to actually leverage the 5G infrastructure, not only as a dumb pipe provider, but also bringing some intelligence, as Randeep was saying, applying some, like AI, ML, applying some sort of, the method by which we integrate or the couple the application and the services along with the infrastructure. So that's my view, that otherwise the business case will be very tough.
Excellent. So fantastic. So just to wrap up this thread, Hilary and Sandeep, if I could quickly get the two of you in. Hilary, if you'd like to go first. Just your views on monetization of 5G and relevant use cases in the short term and then in the slightly longer term, and what you're seeing globally. And Sandeep, the same with you, please. And then we'll move on to the next thread of the discussion.
Thanks, Ron. I think the view that's been expressed so far is quite accurate, right? We're seeing MBB use cases and actually FWA, fixed wireless access for additional home capacity is quite important. We also have in some countries, there's just a genuine need to make better use of spectrum. And that's a driver for 5G in some cases, like in Finland. And we have seen some uplift for some operators. So some operators are getting about 10% uplift because of reaching out to targeting the right populations and pricing models that work. The other thing that we're seeing quite a bit of is bundling of gaming, bundling of smart glasses, bundling of devices as a way to capture uplift with the 10% to 20% of subscribers that are high value. I think it's important in the Indian context to think about India as an innovative, a country that is significant on the world stage as an innovator. And that's something I haven't heard in this conversation so far that I think is an important part of the view of 5G going forward, because I think not only, so indeed, we do expect the industrial use cases to take a bit more time. And that's partly on the basis of how the standardization is working. So we think about 5G advanced being really the time when, and I think that's why you're getting 5 years forward, Rohan, as the time when we can see mass customization of 5G industrial use cases. But I think there's quite a bit that's happening already in ports. I think Randeep gave the example of ports. We see quite a bit of automation beginning in ports now. And I think it is, as Randeep mentioned and Shyam mentioned as well, it's a long road. So we need to make sure that we're open enough. And this is this platform play that Jagbir mentioned is really important, right? Because it does need to be a platform play to allow for innovation. But I wouldn't underestimate what India can contribute to 5G. So I think that's maybe one piece I haven't heard yet.
Got you. Sandeep, let's bring you in. Thank you very much, Hilary. Hilary mentioned some pretty interesting points around the potential uplift, 10 to 20% uplift, especially with the higher value segment of customers, and also mentioned the very relevant theme of innovation, right? We will come to the innovation theme, Hilary. I think innovation, the way you probably meant it, was more around product innovation, the go-to-market innovation. But I think there will also need to be a significant innovation on the cost side, on the CapEx spend side. Do we do it on an active sharing basis? How do we minimize our costs to make the 5G business case viable? Yeah. So we will come into that, but I think a very relevant point that you raised. Sandeep, let me bring you in as well as Sanjay yourself. So quickly, your thoughts on the potential for innovation in terms of pricing as well as product, and whether it could lead to ARPU uplift or a higher share of wallet in an Indian context.
Thanks, Rohan. And I think a very good segue from all the other panelists on some of these discussions. So the way we look at it, or I look at it, is that if we enhance mobile broadband is almost a simple commonsensical extension of what we do today. Whether that goes for an increase in revenue or not is a question which I don't have the right competence to answer, but we have seen this transition from different technologies from 2 to 3 to 4 to now 5G, and enhanced mobile broadband, yes, provides a lot of cost efficiency in terms of how much traffic you can pull in at from that perspective, but not so much in the revenues, maybe marginal at best. However, when we look at how the whole ecosystem is developing, Rohan, and I'll take probably a minute and a half on this, how the whole ecosystem is developing is, there are 4 or 5 big levers which I start to see, which are all coming together, and other panelists have referred to it. The edge cloud, the spread of edge cloud. Then there is this whole topic around the IoT. Then there is this topic around disaggregation of technology, and then there is the whole system integration bit, elastic business models which are coming in, meaning sharing, which you said you will refer to later, and then plenty of sort of private equity money which is chasing all of these segments which I talked about. So what this just tells us is that there is plenty of interest and plenty of upside which the people see in this industry. Now, have we all explored that upside, and do we know where the upside will come from? Probably not. It will, we will evolve. Enhanced broadband is a well-known use case, but industrial IoT probably a little bit later. B2B2X, starting to take life. But let's not forget, and this is my final comment, especially for a country like India, which is still a big, the topic of digital divide is still a pretty big topic. And that can potentially be a large enterprise government-like revenue stream, if you will. How do we take the same lifestyle which people like us who are privileged to be living in large cities have, take it to the last person or take it to the villages and the gram panchayats and the districts and so on? How do we include the tier 2 city, people who are qualifying in tier 2 cities and have to come to tier 1 for work related or other opportunities. So all of them can be converted to revenues at some point of time and in a meaningful way. Now, who goes first is an important topic. And many of these cases will be bespoke. Randeep alluded to that. So I do see a lot of potential for India in terms of revenue, but probably not so much from enhanced mobile broadband, but more from the other use cases, whether they are government, institutional, industrial, etc., etc.
Excellent. Oh, fantastic. And Sanjay, let's get you in to wrap up this thread. Sandeep touched upon digital divide, the importance of newer use cases from an Indian context, as well as concepts such as edge cloud and disaggregation of networks. So just your thoughts on how these newer trends on edge computing and disaggregation of networks will help bridge the digital divide.
First of all, thank you, Rohan. And I heard every panelist give very nice views on this. I think predominantly what we'll see, there will be a paradigm shift, which will move from I'll just talk about some comments on the previous comments, which have been spoken about. From B2C, that's been the biggest area which the operators have been working on. Now, B2B and B2B2C is something which is the paradigm shift. Now, to get to the B2B2C, wherein the private networks will become very predominant use case, and alluding to what Jagbir just said, the disaggregation, the open platform, the accelerators like bringing satellite communication into the picture, reducing the cost, and making completely open platform and bringing onboarding the different partners and businesses into the play will give rise to many, many use cases. And that's how it'll start bringing the cost of service down. That's how it will bring the cost of use case down. And that's how it'll start getting into scale. Achieving economies of scale and making the relevance of 5G to a common man would actually go through smart and safe cities. When today we see cameras capturing the traffic defaulters, or cameras catching information about any emergency services like the fire tender, or let's say ambulances, in AI is brought around that. I think that's something which will bring up premium use cases in the market, and that's how it will touch the common man's life. And that's how you would see the 5G is not about just the 4G YouTube, but 5G is all about increasing the touch points in the industry, having multi-sector connectivity, of course, and you'll see a lot of businesses being born in the process.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sanjay. Having discussed the monetization and the revenue side of things, let's move a little towards the cost side of things. I know spectrum prices, especially for 5G spectrum bands, and other costs related to 5G have been discussed in quite a lot of detail on all kinds of forums already. But let me come back to you, Shyam. It still remains an important question and a potential impediment to 5G really picking up in India, both on the low band, whether it's 700 megahertz, as well as on the 3.5 gigahertz band. I wanted to start off with you and then get to Randeep and Jagbir as well. Just your thoughts on spectrum pricing in India, please. And whether it could really serve as an impediment and what the government really needs to do to get its act together.
See, I think, Rohan, for a while now, and the decade that has passed and the 4G auctions and the 3G auctions have given us various swinging insights about the right way and wrong way of doing spectrum. We've all, as an industry, are very clear, and I think nobody is hit bigger than the telcos themselves with the way the policy things have happened. And I think that has only made us wiser. But if you look at this in a holistic sense, and Jagbir actually alluded to it very nicely, it is what is the contribution of value creation which a telco does in this whole ecosystem? I think that is consistently being underplayed. You're talking about, and I think pandemic again, we were talking about pandemic heroes and people who took care of, but it were the telcos who actually kept the country connected. It were the telcos which actually made the machine kept on running other than anything else. And this is just one example which has come to the fore. But if you look at the contribution which telcos do, and it starts right from the infrastructure requirement. I mean, digging a road to get the fiber connected, to erecting a tower to get the radio put in, with the backhaul, with the requirement, the data center investments. I think the holistic cost of doing business here from an infrastructure like 5G deployment perspective. And then I would also like to highlight the humongous diversity, both in terms of demography, geography, which India possesses, and also from the policy perspective. There are RWAs, and then there are agencies and municipalities and governments and state governments. So I think before you actually make a network live or a part of a network live, there are so many, I won't call them hindrances per se, Rohan, but there are so many things to do which needs to be get done at the right cost and at the right thing. And then at the end of it, when you stitch it all together and then create something called a deliverable network, the revenue part or the value part starts coming in. So I think before we talk about the cost of the spectrum, I think somewhere, and I'm sure now the government has paid heed to this with whatever is happening, saying that what is the total end-to-end cost of getting a service on board? And if you look at that service on board, of course, spectrum comes as one of the biggest and most important, most significant raw materials, which is going to make this real. So what's the portion of cost of spectrum as perpetuated on the revenue which the operators will accrue over next 20 years? What's the cost of infrastructure? What's the cost of electronics? What's the cost of service innovation and the intellectual property which gets leased out? I think at some point of time, we will, as an industry, as even as a licensor and regulator, government has to look at this in a slightly holistic concept rather than looking at a fragmented cost and then trying to treat that particular issue rather than looking at the whole challenge holistically. And this has become all the more important, just to conclude what I'm trying to say, Rohan, is because the technology as 5G will not only be spectrum sensitive, it will be infrastructure intensive going forward. So right from ground zero to actually having that electromagnetic wave emitted out from the radio, I think each one of them has cost elements, effort elements, policy elements, time elements. And unless you kind of look at this in the right perspective, in the right fraction, it will be very, very difficult to put a tag on the cost of the spectrum.
Absolutely. If I may just bring in an interesting anecdotal story on the cost of spectrum. So we were talking to and speaking and working with an operator in a mid-sized Asian country, ladies and gents, and that Asian country was evaluating, the regulator there was evaluating whether they just administer the 3.5 gigahertz band, it's a 3-operator market, and give away 100 megahertz of 3.5 gigahertz each for $60 million to each operator, $60 million per operator on over a 20-year time frame. And the operators were really fibbing on how expensive the regulator has made the 3.5 gigahertz band with asking them to pay $60 million for 20 years. And I really wanted to tell them that come to India and $60 million will seem like a drop in the ocean, but well, I think different countries and different backgrounds there. But I think goes back to what you were saying, Shyam. Fair enough. Randeep and Jagbir, let me bring you folks in as well. Just if you'd like to share some thoughts on the cost of spectrum in India, the fact that 700 itself has been such an expensive band and none of the operators have it still, as well as potentially comment on how Shyam put it very nicely, that it's not just the cost of spectrum, that's one of the big costs, but there are other costs associated, whether on the backhaul side with fiber, whether just the cost of doing business and kind of rolling out that entire infrastructure for 5G. So just your thoughts on it, Randeep, if you'd like to go first, Jagbir, if you'd like to wrap up the thread.
You've said rightly about the spectrum pricing. This is one key ingredient, and I think not just the spectrum price itself, but also the upfront payment, because that will come on the cash flow of the company. It is not just the spectrum total price itself, which you can amortize over the period of your spectrum time. You see, let me take a bigger picture here that India's ambition of being a 5 trillion economy is largely heaving on how digital we can go, how we can enable the digital side of economy, which is not the telecom economy. It is telecom as an enabler, enabling the digital side of our everything. I mean, now today, even if you go to banking, it is digital. If you go to airline, it is digital. Hospitality is digital. Everything has to have the digital angle to it, purely for the same thing as productivity and efficiency. More efficient you are, better margin you can make, more you will invest. This will really spiral us into getting our economy in shape and getting a much higher growth and really reaching for this thing. So really government should see telecom sector not as a revenue source, but as a source which will really create a lot of, you not say a tax revenue, which will come out of the incomes of the company rather than taxing the spectrum fees itself in upgo. So I would see that, I mean, when there were so many operators, that time probably it was seen as there are so many guys vying for one small this thing. So there is a value in it. Today, the operators have to not only pay for the spectrum, but also pay for the infrastructure and then really fight to get permissions. Like for ROWs, it's very expensive ROWs in some parts of India. So that really limits to how much you can do, how much you cannot do. So a comprehensive approach to really build a connected India, and in a shared way. I would say there should not be like 3 roads going parallel, 3 fibers going parallel. There should be unbundling of national assets and really open up to ensure that Indian operators are healthy and are investing to connect each part of India, not just cities, but even rural India, to get every Indian connected, who can then participate into the digital economy. If you look at economies who are doing well, if you look at China, Japan, Korea, in Asia, if I take examples, their fiberization, the availability of fiber is phenomenal compared to India. India, even after 25, 26 years of telecom, we are not there in fiber, even if you put the assets of every fiber company together.
Yeah.
So somewhere we need to see this as a national issue, not as an operator's issue. And 700 frequency you mentioned, it is such a valuable frequency. I mean, if you see, even for first responders, they use this kind of frequencies. If for connecting the rural, we use this thing. When India is talking about a BBNL project to connect every village by laying 10 lakh kilometers of fiber, I would say laying a 700 megahertz based on network, would probably reach the rural India faster and more higher level connectivity. So I think it's a holistic issue. Availability of telecom enabling, you can say regulations, and making it really work, not just having a regulation like ROW has a regulation, but it is a state subject subsequently. I think will really help a healthy telecom sector, a healthy investment by telecom sector, especially in a technology like 5G, which can really fast track our digital economy, is the need of the hour, is what I will say.
Absolutely. And Jagbir, thank you, Randeep. Jagbir, if we could pull you in and just get your thoughts on the same.
Yeah, so I think Randeep has summarized very well, and Shyam raised all the concern end-to-end service cost. So I think these are the 2 important aspects. But I'll just add, just to add some more input, like every time we try to copy, advanced country like South Korea, Japan, China, let's copy them. They are doing 5G, we should not be behind. But just see the policies of those countries. So Randeep was saying like every building in Korea you go is having the fiber. Japan, everyone has the fiber. China is like a free policy, like putting fiber. Every building or every state has the fiber. What's the cost of spectrum? Peanuts over there. And Rohan, you also answered actually like one example of, whatever the country is. So I think the answer in terms of the cost of the spectrum you have already given, and we are all saying, both Randeep and Shyam, indirectly that, it should be very, very affordable. It cannot be compared to the past. Otherwise, there will not be any 5G the way we are thinking. So let's not copy anybody or talk about anybody in the half manner. Talk end to end. What the cost of spectrum, what the policy for the fiber, infrastructure, everything. Then you talk about the digitization, then talk about the, 5G penetration, etc. So that is one aspect. Second is, I just want to put as an action. One is whether it's a 700 or, 3.5 or whatever it's going to be, should be very, very low price compared to the past, no reference. Second is, I think as Randeep was saying on the fiber, let's have like, for example, I'm just saying, 3 years window, develop the infrastructure fiber. And again, as Randeep was saying, maybe third company, shared company, contributed by all operator. Okay, so, and give the one central location, one window for ROW, all state, all municipal, everything. Okay, and this is like you can share duct, you can share dark fiber, you can share anything, and allow this three years or 4 years or 2 years, whatever the window government want to allow, to develop the fiber infrastructure. Otherwise, we'll always keep cribbing like this only. There's no 5G. Each base station has to be connected on fiber if we really want to take advantage of low latency and the high speed. The third point, I think around if it's going to be 3.5, you need to have more towers and the poles. I think again, there should be a good policy around it, which is cost effective, shared policy, because the current tower infrastructure will not be able to serve the 3.5 gigahertz. And again, it should be affordable. So I think these are the issues. So spectrum price is one input. Second is a fiber, because without that, there's no 5G. And the third is rules and, like the permissions. Then only you can talk about the business case. Then we can talk about the use case. So then the operators have the enough money, bandwidth to think about developing the use case, contributing to digital economy.
Very good points, Jagbir. No, thank you for that. Okay, let's just in the interest of time, we've got a couple of minutes left towards the fag end of this discussion. Sandeep and Hilary and Sanjay, I wanted to pull you folks in. Hilary, I wanted to specifically get your thoughts on some of the innovative trends that are coming into being and that could help the cost side of the 5G business case. Most specifically, I wanted to get your thoughts on the potential for active sharing, what Sandeep rightly referred to as elastic business model. Yeah. And then Sandeep, I wanted to get your specific thoughts on disaggregated networks and how Open RAN and disaggregated networks could really help on the cost side with the 5G business case. Yeah. And Sanjay, then I wanted to come to you finally and get your thoughts on both. So Hilary, just very quickly, if we could start off with you on what your thoughts are in terms of active sharing, the importance of active sharing for making the 5G business case more lucrative, what you've seen globally and how it might apply to India.
Sure. So actually, in my last role until quite recently, I was running our business in Nordics, Baltics, and Benelux. So I had operators, for example, in Denmark, where they do active sharing. So Telenor and Telia do some active sharing. We have the experience, sharing has been available for mobile technologies, and honestly, we had the same debate with 4G. It was going to be very expensive to deploy. 5G is different, and it's absolutely true that we need to roll fiber everywhere. It's a much more expensive play, and I absolutely agree with the operators on what's been said here around the need to look holistically at the cost and understand and encourage governments where 5G is most successful and will be is where governments are being cognizant of the need to address spectrum appropriately. And obviously in India, that's still a very hot debate. Sharing is complicated because for active sharing, passive sharing is pretty straightforward, but active sharing becomes quite difficult. And we've seen in many cases over the past 20 years, actually, I've seen operators try it and fail. We've seen some operators manage to keep it going. So Denmark is a good example, but it's very rare. And the reason is because it does require quite a bit of coordination and mutual agreement between partners. So having been the operational partner for some shared networks and seen the discussions between operators, it's very common that one operator wants to move faster than the other, or they want different features than the other. It becomes more and more difficult to compete in certain regards when you work with active sharing. However, it is obviously, it's quite, we support it. We support it. I think I have 5 networks that we're building in Nordics, Baltics, and Benelux that include active sharing. And it certainly is an option as one way to reduce the cost structure. It just has to be you have to have partners that are very able to come to agreement. And in a market where you have 3 major operators, it also raises policy questions typically. So oftentimes regulators have issues around it as well. So it's quite possible to do, but tricky, I would say.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Sandeep, thank you for that, Hilary. Sandeep, let's pull you in and have you specifically speak about disaggregated networks and then how disaggregated networks and Open RAN could play a part in helping drive 5G.
Yeah. So disaggregated networks, I mean, clearly as an industry, what we have seen over the last several decades is that the network has been somewhat of a black box, that all the parts of the network needed to come from largely one player or a set of select players. So what the disaggregation of the technology has done really is that it has allowed the playing field to open up to not only the large OEMs, but also many of the people who are relatively young and also don't have the necessary or the financial muscle which the hitherto the legacy technology needed. So this has allowed many of the newer players to come in, and STL is just one example, and Sanjay from Mavenir is here. So Mavenir is just another example, and there are plenty of those. So what does, and combine that with the geopolitical situation which is around us, it opens up a number of new avenues for our operator customers to look at when it comes to looking at their network suppliers. So that inherently has a cost benefit when you have the competitive landscape, which is wider than a couple of players. So therefore, in my opinion, the disaggregated or the Open RAN is the way the future is. The way at least we are seeing it today is that almost every operator in their ongoing requirements is speccing in Open RAN. Some going to the next step of buying different pieces from different players. What is still kind of missing in the Open RAN story is that the emergence of a large scaled system integrator who can bring several components together. But the good news for us really is that when we look at India and the operators in India, whether it is Jio or Airtel or Vodafone Idea, combine that with the incentives and the push which the government has on the PLIs and similar to actually have an ecosystem from India emerge on the 5G. So all of these are actually excellent signs that this ecosystem will emerge faster, it will mature faster, and potentially India could be the innovative, and to Hilary's point in the beginning, India could be the innovation lab or the innovation factory for some of these topics. You had briefly touched on the shared networks as well, Rohan. I think shared networks, once again, I turn around and say that, probably the best and the example of the shared network we brought in the world was Indus Towers in India probably 15 years ago, right? Nobody thought that tower sharing was possible, but it is. And I think the shared networks are also the future way to go, whether it is on the passive side or on the active side and so on. So both of them coming, I think India is playing a big role in making those happen. And it's great to be a part of that ecosystem.
Gotcha. No, fantastic. Very helpful, Sandeep. Thank you for that. Sanjay, let's pull you in and get your thoughts both on shared networks as well as what disaggregated networks could do to help drive 5G.
Yeah. So Rohan, I would allude to the points which Sandeep just mentioned, and of course allude to the points, connect the 2 points which I think Randeep mentioned, Jagbir mentioned about what's the situation for the operators and how do they make the best. OTT players took away the lunch, etc. But I'll just cover everything. I'll just connect all the dots together. Precisely, I think the Open RAN, birth of Open RAN has taken place on the premise that it has to be an open platform and no vendor lock-ins in terms of hardware connectivity, and open the interfaces towards the rest of the world so that the dimensions of slicing, dimensions of automation, dimensions of zero-touch provisioning, etc., so that it becomes a platform like an IT platform. I mean, network as a platform, we can see examples of Rakuten, we can see examples of Dish in the world. I think those are the fundamental things which will start looking at low cost of service, as of course, we can't touch the topic of spectrum, as just talked about. And of course, bringing more partners who develop the use cases and so on and so forth. And the other accelerators, which this, I'm not saying Open RAN again alone does it. Open RAN is basically completely, agnostic to the cloud
technologies used here, whether it's the AWS or all the hyperscale players, which need to be brought in. I think all these things makes it a complete machine, a business machine for 5G to bring up the best economies and giving impact to the rest of the industry. And the digital economy is something which we see, I mean, alluding to what Randeep said, I think operators should be seen as enablers for the economy, because we will see in the times to come, lots of new businesses getting born. We saw it in the erstwhile years in 2000 when messaging came to India. You know, in 99, you had a 0.001 message per sub per day as a statistics. And now, you know, in 2006, it's almost 350 messages per sub per day, I think, and the proliferation has seen. And that industry became about 600 crores as we see today. Yeah. So I think it's a policy push required. It's a, more collaborative industries to be required to come closer and build these use cases. And these cases, to Jagbir's point, they have to really work operationally. I mean, unless they work operationally, it's no point, they cannot scale, very simply.
Fantastic. Very helpful, Sanjay. Thank you. So just to wrap up then, if I may summarize all of the very insightful thoughts that we've heard from each of the panelists. On the first of our three discussion threads, clearly lots of potential for 5G in India, just as there is globally. More of the same in the short term, Shyam, as you rightly put it, but clearly lots of innovative B2C, B2B2C, B2B use cases around productivity, safety, so on and so forth, that will come to the fore in the out years. So clearly lots of potential and opportunity there. In terms of costs and impediments, clearly a little more support needed from the government, if not a lot more support in terms of ease of doing business as well as managing the spectrum costs that are quite high in India. And then in terms of trends and opportunities to use active sharing as well as disaggregated networks, clearly an opportunity for India to be at the cutting edge of innovation and be what Hilary mentioned as the innovation lab to the world. So lots of interesting insights, folks, ladies and gents. Thank you very much for joining and sharing each of your thoughts.
Thank you, everyone.